participants, welcome to our today discussion. The topic of today's discussion will be the EXPO World Exhibition in Dubai. And I just need to say that this project is in cooperation with the Visegrad Academy of Cultural Diplomacy, and it's co-founded by Polish Ministry of National Heritage, Sport and Education. And we are very pleased that our invitation was accepted by Dominika Jurashova, which was in the preparation team for EXPO Dubai 2020. So welcome. And I would like to give floor to you. So floor is yours.
So first off, can everyone hear me well? Is the audio okay?
Yeah, we hear you very well.
Great. Thank you very much for the introduction. So I guess we'll move to the presentation right away. I can just say a few words about myself. I'm currently studying philosophy at Anton Neuwirth's College in Slovakia. I was working in the Ministry of Economy in the core team in the previous months that were critical to the whole organization. And before, some of my hobbies are academic debate, and I was working in some startups. So that's why I also like the Expo, and with its focus on innovation, was very close to my heart. And I will first give some overview presentation of what Expo is, what are its goals, if it actually is achieving them or not. Then maybe some information on the Slovak pavilion, what was the concept of it, and then we can move to discussion about questions that you have. I think there are some controversial things that can be discussed, so I'm looking forward to that as well. So first off, I would like to ask maybe if you can, with the use of reactions, maybe show me who of you have heard of Expo before, if you could explain the format and the goals of the exhibition, and maybe if you have perhaps read some articles about the Slovak pavilion. So if you could just show me how familiar people are. So if you have the understanding of what it is, at least to a certain extent, you can raise the hand. So I am a bit familiar. So I know how the audience is familiar with it. Okay, it doesn't seem that many people know about it. So if you can move to the next slide, please. So just a basic introduction. So what is the World Exhibition as such? Maybe with a look at the history, the World Fair concept emerged at the end of 19th century, and it was called the Great Exhibition of the Works of Industry of all nations. And it reflected the rapid changes that came with the Industrial Revolution, and it showcased the material progress that happened thanks to the technological innovation of that era. And it was also known as the Crystal Palace Expo because it was built. It was exhibited in this huge crystal construction that was built in the Hyde Park in London for these purposes. And so the main idea of this event is to foster peaceful competition between nations, because obviously each country that is participating wants to show off them as the best in the best possible light. And it wants to show the best companies, products, the research. And thus, it also encourages the exchange of these ideas, and it inspires the visitors. And so the World Expo is the third largest global event in terms of cultural and economic impact. The first is the Olympic Games, and the second is FIFA, the World Cup. And it takes place every 5 years. It is organized by a nation that wins the rights to host the event, that's similar to the Olympic Games, for example. And so it is a platform for the global community to share innovations, to engage in expert debates about key issues that the world is facing. It is an economic accelerator, especially for the region that is hosting the event. So currently for Dubai and the United Arab Emirates. But it is also just a venue for entertainment. One of the main purposes is to entertain the visitors that go to the restaurants and go to different cultural events. So it is a mix of different priorities that it is pursuing. If you can move to the next slide. A huge part, this is just a side note, not critical to this presentation, but a huge part of Expo is the architecture itself. And hence each country wants to bring something new and memorable to the expos. It is a space for architecture to evolve from pure functionalism, because there's always a certain budget devoted to coming up with some unique and interesting structure. And the pictures down below, the Eiffel Tower and Atomium in Brussels and the Space Needle in Seattle, are all products of this, that there was given space, like there was created space for architects to kind of step out of the classical purposes of just architecture that is trying to be the most economic and not really providing the world with a new concept of architecture. And so this also shows that, these buildings, they were created for Expo, but they stayed long after, and they are still one of the most lucrative touristic attractions in the cities where they are located. And this kind of hints the long-lasting economic impact of expos for the countries that are hosting them, because it still accelerates how attractive the place is for tourists from all around the world in general. If you can go to the next slide. So also this year, the Dubai organizers created something unique, and it is the largest unsupported dome that is called Al Wasl Plaza, and it is pioneering in terms of the engineering and the structure, and the building itself is the center of the Expo district. But so regarding architecture and the construction of these huge exhibition areas, as similar to the Olympic Games, there is a controversial and critical question about sustainability of these projects, because you build huge areas and buildings for an event that is taking place only half a year. And this creates risk of creating ghost towns and just areas that won't be used afterwards. And so this issue was tackled very successfully this year, and that is that the Dubai organizers have handled this issue by creating a project called District 2020. And this means that the whole Expo area will be later transformed into a smart city that will be centered on the needs of its community. And so the following 6 months of the exhibition, so after the 6 months of the exhibition, the District 2020 will repurpose 80% of the building and the built environment into something that will resemble a normal city with facilities for people to work, live, and spend free time. But now to move to the actual event. Next slide, please. And one more. So the EXPO Dubai 2020, some basic facts about the whole project is that there are 192 participating countries. There are a lot of international organizations like the European Union, World Health Organization that are taking part. Either they have their own pavilion, or they are organizing events or having events hosted by the country's pavilions. There are a lot of nonprofit organizations and educational institutions like universities taking place. And this is, again, one of the benefits of the whole event, that is really strengthening the relationships between public and private sector, between research and private sector. So that's a huge plus. The date, it started in October and will last till March next year. And so the the expectation for visitors was 25 million, of which 70% were supposed to be internationals. Obviously, this was changed and tailored based on the current pandemic situation. So the number of visitors is still high. It achieved 3 million in 5 weeks. But it is definitely composed of more people from the Arab Peninsula, the region. And so the whole topic of pandemic is quite an extensive one. The whole expo was actually once moved. That's why it's called EXPO Dubai 2020, even though we're already in 2021. But thanks to the good pandemic situation in the UAE, it was, well, we successfully achieved that it can be held physically, but there are still certain restrictions, like all the staff has to be vaccinated, and there's a limited number of visitors per meter squared. So it tried to tackle this issue responsibly, I think, which it did. But again, that's another question, if in the midst of pandemic, it is right or not right to organize such large events and concentrate people and incentivize people to travel for Expo, for example. So the main theme is connecting minds and creating the future. This is obviously very vague. It's divided into 3 main categories. And so if you also see on the picture, there are 3 main branches of the physical space, and each of them is focused on one of the sub-themes. The first one is opportunity. This is about reflecting the necessity of financial capital as a resource to support growth. The theme where also the Slovak pavilion is located is mobility. It's physical mobility for individuals, access and distribution of goods, but also virtual connectivity through information technology. And the last category is sustainability. So obviously, just the need to use resources more responsibly and not to compromise the ability of our planet to sustain future generations. If you can move to the next slide, please. So on top of this organization, there is a kind of a new thing happening this time, this expo, and that is that there are theme weeks, which were very helpful. Also speaking on behalf of the Slovak organizing part, these theme weeks are happening throughout the half year, and they create and they maximize the effectivity of the event. Because if, for example, simply speaking, if you are a business person working in the field of agriculture, you obviously come for the theme week of agriculture, and you maximize, the ability to meet with potential partners, to see the right showcases. Because before, each pavilion was just creating the whole program individually, so there was much lower coordination in terms of the themes and of the focuses. And again, as I said, this was very helpful for Slovakia and provided us with guidelines on how to design the whole concept of the pavilion. If you can move to the next slide. So the goals of the Slovak pavilion was to introduce innovative and sophisticated technologies, and also to contribute with solutions on sustainable development and green economy. And this also goes aligned with fulfilling the policy goals of the UN and of the EU, and just overall to create environment for trade and investment opportunities, as well as science and research. And so why is it so critical is that, as probably many of you have heard, there are certain economic models, and Slovakia is located in one of them, which is still just benefiting from the fact that we have cheap labor, or that the government is able to provide tax havens, etc., for future investors or potential investors. But the priority also I think the current government, and what should be our priority, is to move to economic model based on innovations, so we can actually offer certain knowledge that we'll be selling, not just the execution of the industry. And this is critical because, again, in Slovakia, there are a lot of small companies that are doing a great job, but they don't have the ability to enter the global market. And there are many simple mechanisms through which EXPO is actually helping this. And it is actually really ridiculous, because from the simplest one you can imagine, and that is that the company translates its website into English and potentially other languages for the sake of EXPO. It already helps its ability to attract international investors and clients, etc. And so there are a lot of mechanisms like this through which the company that takes part in Expo really elevates its ability then to upscale its business. For example, also through the fact that those companies, they had to create certain presentation materials like videos and like websites, or they had to create profiles on different networking platforms. And this also helps them to kind of like, because many companies are operating, but they don't have the time to, for example, put all these materials together. And thanks to this incentive, they devoted, also the finances, because the companies are financing their participation themselves, to be able to have this, step that is necessary for them to open up. If you can move to the next slide, please. Yes, and then so the central theme of Slovak Pavilion is mobility, future of mobility, and this was divided by the Ministry of Economy into 3 subcategories, and that is the use of hydrogen. I don't know if you know, but it is one of the main agendas of the current Prime Minister, and it is the technologies of hydrogen propulsion as the fuel for future. The second topic is the technologies in space sector. And the third one is aviation industry. Maybe, I don't know if many of you know, but Slovakia is the countries with the highest number of light-weighted airplanes produced per citizen. So we have actually really successful and really interesting subjects that are working on this field. And that's why we also decided to put as our priority and provide them with the biggest space for presentation in the pavilion. And so, yes, so representative of these 3 topics are the 3 main exhibits. And the first one is the hydrogen car that has the see-through bodywork, so people can actually see how the engine and the hydrogen storage is working. And it was produced in cooperation of the Technical University in Košice with a private company, Matador Group, which again is something very crucial that the Expo is fostering, and that is, the cooperation between businesses and universities that can then better react to the demand, for example, in terms of which disciplines it should be, again, prioritizing in their curriculum. It teaches students how to work on actual project, give them some practical knowledge, provides also better flow of investment in terms of research for Slovakia. So this is one of the exhibits. The second one is Space End Rover, which is also a very unique project. And also people are surprised that we have something like this in Slovakia, but there are actually a lot of technologies that Slovakia is delivering to the world space sector in terms of communication, or as the example of this End Rover. And so it's an autonomous robot with artificial intelligence that is very multifunctional. And so the third exhibit is the ultralight personal gyroplane. It works like a helicopter, but it needs space for takeoff. And for example, interesting with this one is that when it was first introduced to the organizers and kind of to the world in the Slovak Pavilion, Slovakia got contacted by Dubai police that was interested in either renting or buying a few of those gyroplanes for their purposes. And this again shows how, showcasing the things that we have here is necessary because they are of certain quality, just the world doesn't know about them. So that's interesting. So maybe the Dubai police will be using some of those. If you can move to the next slide, please. Yes, so this is the theme zone mobility where the Slovak Pavilion is located. You can go further. Slovakia wasn't building their own pavilion, so some countries were, for example, the UK or the nations that are putting a lot more investment into this. Is again a critical question about if we should prioritize investing in such events that is for many people very, distanced from their daily lives. Shouldn't we rather put, this money into education, or, increase the salaries of medical workers? But the simple answer to that is that Slovakia really spent very low budget on preparing Expo in comparison to other nations in proportion to their GDP. And that was achieved also through certain, economic decisions, like renting a building instead of building their own in the in the district. You can go further. So there's the main floor where the main exhibits are throughout the whole 6 months period showcased. There's, for example, a lot of staff that is helping the people that enter the pavilion to understand the technology, and they they go with them through the exhibits. So it's very interactive for people that come. You can go further. Then there is a room with 3D projection that was given to one of the main partners of Slovak of the pavilion, and that is the newly created agency Slovakia Travel. So they actually prepared a lot of interactive content for the people, through which they're presenting just the tourism and the cultural heritage for the visitors. And also, for example, this was very strategically designed. For example, with regards on the region and on the visitors that are coming. So as you might know, in the Arab world, there's very famous bathing culture, and in this field, Slovakia has also a lot to offer. We have a lot of natural and thermal spas that are lucrative to visitors. So this was taken in account when designing the content of this projection room. So this one is used by Slovakia Travel. And if you can go further, also one more thing is that when it comes to the tourism that is presented, the ministry was working in very close cooperations with the regions. So we organized a meeting where all the Slovak regions were represented, and they could offer different material that they would like to present. And so again, this was very successful, in my opinion, in how the ministry was really trying to take different stakeholders into the organizing part. So then there are the rotating exhibits, and so this was my primary role when I was working at the ministry, and that was to communicate with the companies that are presenting there. So the whole expo, it's not just about the 3 exhibits that I mentioned before, in the car and the Land Rover and the airplane, but for each of the theme weeks that I showed previously, there are around 20 to 30 companies that from Slovakia that take part, and they have the space of those rotating rooms to show different video material, or even some samples. If they are, for example, creating some material or some technology, they can also bring it there, and people go through it. A lot of business people go there, and there is a huge logistical a design based on which we created the schedule in which they are presenting. But so in each of these theme weeks, there are 30 more subjects that come to the pavilion and present their work. If you can go further. Then there's a conference room, and this serves for experts' talks on different discussion panels. Again, each of the theme weeks is under the auspices of one of the ministries, which is again a show of great cooperation. So even though the Ministry of Economy is responsible for Expo as such, each theme week was taken under auspices by one of the ministries. So for example, the Agriculture Week is taken under auspices by the Ministry of Agriculture, etc. And they are organizing so-called business travels. They organize different talks, they invite experts. So they were creating the program for each of them. And also then we worked with different partners like Globsec. I don't know if you know, it's a huge and very successful think tank, and they helped us to put together talks on topics like sustainability, etc. They were creating interesting speakers. There was the European Commissioner for Slovakia and just many other researchers. So there was a space for expert talks and for exchange of those ideas as well. And if you can go further. And so the last part is like the cultural aspect of Expo. And so, yes, each of the pavilions is hosting cultural events. So for example, in terms of Slovakia, there are certain concerts being held on regular basis. Then there's also the restaurant, which is, again, one of the crucial aspects of Expo, because when the visitors come and they're spending their whole day visiting different pavilions, obviously there's a space for gastronomy. So Slovakia invited some of the best chefs that we have, and they are also like rotating there. And the whole restaurant has a concept of Andy Warhol, so there are his artworks exhibited. And so the last part is just simply the art exhibits. We have artists like Juraj Varga or Monika Mikisova that are showing their artworks there. And this again is space for the visitors to get familiar with the modern Slovak art and, you know, to be able to purchase it or just to, you know, increase the awareness. But all of these like cultural aspects of Expo, this is again one of the things that can be discussed, was a little controversial. In a lot of media, there was kind of emphasis on the fact that, you know, we're not presenting the full culture, the real Slovak traditions, and this is something that was done purposefully in the previous expos. So the last expo was held in Milan, and we still had the typical model of, you know, the staff was dressed in folk costumes. We were, you know, cooking traditional food, etc. But really, this year's or this expo's focus was to present Slovakia as a modern country, as something that is attractive for the investors. It's not something outdated. It's not like isolated world that, you know, no longer exists even in our lives. So why would we be presenting it to the outer world then? So also in the terms of cuisine, in the terms of the events, we know there are certain like folk groups that will be performing, but there are also like a lot of modern artists that are at least combining folk music with electronic music or something. So it's actually, you know, more to the point. And yeah, also with the art exhibits, we are trying to provide space and platform for young artists and for modern art. So this would be all from me as some like basis for the discussion for how the pavilion is put together. And if you have any questions, now we can go into the discussion part, and I'm happy to answer anything that I would be able to.
Thank you for so much for your presentation. I think that there was like a lot of interesting information to discuss.